Welcome to participants. Our webinar will start in 5 more minutes.
Mesatnya pung luhur jauh di awang-awang, mebar kencang jambang bangun tayak karingrang, kupuna rangkoas terjempa matuk nangelup, ngapak mega baringi benak tarik yuruku, saha anu bisa justru karena tandanglah, kandang yang pertentang tayak bandingan anak, dipika gimir dipika serap kusah sama, tayak karempan kasihan lebar bawa dena. Kadali manuk panggagana, perlambang sakti Indonesia jaya, manuk dadali bangka poncarana, bersab mahiji rukun sakabena, hirup sauyunan apa hiri-hiri, sini dikanya ajung sini bela pati, manuk dadali ngandung silo kasih natria kuna bangsa di negara Indonesia. Mesatnya pung luhur jauh di awang-awang, mebar kencang jambang bangun tayak karingrang, kupuna rangkoas terjempa matuk nangelup, ngapak mega baringi benak tarik dulu, saha anu bisa nyusun kana tandangna, gandang jeung pertentang tayak bandingan anak, dipika gimir dipika serap kusah sama, tayak karempan kasihan lebar bawa dena. Manuk dadali manuk panggagana, perlambang sakti Indonesia jaya, manuk dadali bangka poncarana, bersab mahiji rukun sakabena, hirup sauyunan apa hiri-hiri, sini dikanya anjing sini bela pati, manuk dadali ngandung silo kasih natria, sila kesah bangsa di negara Indonesia, kesakuna bangsa di negara Indonesia. Roposai.
It's already. Okay. I think it's already 16 in Jakarta time. So we will just begin our webinar. So I'm pleased to extend greetings to all of the participants in this webinar. Welcome to the second session of our webinar series on ocean governance. I'm Aldrin, the moderator for today's webinar. So this webinar is organized by INADIS, or the Indonesian Institute of Advanced International Studies. We are basically an interdisciplinary public policy research organization based in Jakarta. And this webinar is part of our initiatives to support the Ocean Decade program by UNESCO. So last month, we had an exciting discussion about traditional knowledge and ocean governance. And today we have again great panelists who will discuss the challenges and solutions for illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Okay, so without further delay, for the first session, I call Dr. Senia Fabrica from the One Ocean Hub to introduce herself and begin the presentation. Dr. Fabrica, you have 10 minutes for the presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Aldrin. My name is Tania Fabrica, and I work for the One Ocean Hub at the University of Strathclyde. I'll start my screen sharing now. I hope you can see my screen. Okay. Aldrin, can you let me know whether it looks okay from your side?
Yes, it's okay. It's clear.
Okay, thank you very much. So my presentation today will address 3 points. The scale of the problem of IUU fishing in Asia Pacific, what has been done and what more can be done. The fish from illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing activities end up on dinner plates around the world. IUU fishing affected many countries. It represents up to 26 million tons of fish every year that worth 23 billion US dollar. This represents 27% of global capture productions, making IUU fishing the third most lucrative natural resource crime, following timber and mining. It undermines national, regional, and international efforts to conserve and manage fish stock, greatly discriminate against fishermen and businesses that act responsibly. And the IUU fishing also goes hand in hand with other crimes that range from document fraud, money laundering, to people trafficking and human rights abuses. My research focused on Bay of Bengal, South China Sea, and also the Pacific Islands. So these 3 regions, they have responsibility over close to 20% of the world fisheries. Over 65% of tuna marketed in the world is captured from this region, mainly from the Pacific Island region. The Bay of Bengal, the South China Sea, and the Pacific Island have faced enormous challenge of IUU fishing. So in 2019, it was reported there are over 40,000 boats fishing illegally in the Bay of Bengal. In the South China Sea, the decline of it in the past 3 decades, there's decline of fish stock by a third and decrease of coral reef by 16%. In the Pacific Islands, the value of the IUU catch in this region is between 707 million to 1,557 million. So this is represent a significant loss for regions that have scarce resources and jobs. At international level, there are a number of agreements that are designed to tackle IUU fishing. I mentioned here three of those examples. The first is the FAO Compliance Agreement. The agreement, the full name is the Agreement to Promote Compliance with International Conservation and Management Measures by Fishing Vessels on the High Sea. It notes the special responsibility of flag states to ensure that none of their vessels are fishing on the high seas unless authorized, and that they can effectively exercise their responsibilities to ensure their vessel comply with international measures. The compliance agreement also seeks to prevent the reflagging of vessel fishing on the high sea under the flag states that are unable or unwilling to enforce international fisheries conservation and management measures. There is agreement called Port State Measures Agreement. Its objective is to prevent, deter, and eliminate IUU fishing by preventing vessels engaged in IUU fishing from using ports and landing their catches. So in this way, this agreement reduces the incentive of such vessels to continue to operate, while it also blocks fishery products derived from IUU fishing from entering national or international markets. There's also the UN Fish Stock Agreement that detail minimum international standards for the conservation and management of fish stock, ensuring that measures taken for conservation and management of these stocks are compatible and coherent. But if you can see from this table here, there's a varying degree of participation among the coastal states in the South China Sea, Bay of Bengal, and also later you will see in the Pacific Islands. So for example, in the South China Sea region, in terms of the FAO compliance agreement, the only coastal state that take part is the Philippines. And in the Bay of Bengal, the only countries that take part in the FAO compliance agreement are Sri Lanka and Myanmar. This is also the case for the countries in the Pacific Island region. If you can see here, there's varying degree of participation across different agreements. At the regional level in South China Sea, the Bay of Bengal and Pacific Island, there are differences in the existing cooperation regimes in managing fisheries. So in the Pacific Island, cooperation initiatives, for example, the Western and Central Pacific Fishery Commissions and the Nauru Agreement, are primarily centered on managing tuna, which is sought after by transnational corporations. In the Bay of Bengal, operations in fishery conservation and management, for example, by the Bay of Bengal large marine ecosystem, include a more diverse range of species, so mackerel, hilsa, tuna. In the South China Sea, because of the disputes, the fishery management is not a priority. So for example, the Partnership in Environmental Management for the Sea of East Asia seems to focus more on pollution prevention and management rather than on IUU fishing. And if you look at the 2002 Declaration on the Code of Conduct Parties in the South China Sea, signed by the members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nation or ASEAN member states and China, address various cooperation in various fields ranging from marine scientific research to combating piracy. Fishery management, however, was not mentioned. So in these circumstances, the question to us is what more can be done? So in terms of cutting edge technology, there have been huge development made by a number of international non-governmental organizations working with private sectors and also big research collaborations such as the One Ocean Hub in working to develop cutting edge technology to help the enforcement and monitoring of IUU fishing. So if you look at Global Fishing Watch, this is developed by Oceana, SkyTruth, and Google. Project Eyes on the Sea by Pew and the Satellite Application Catapult, the Smart Fishing Initiative that's by WWF and NAFAMA, and One Ocean Hub researchers are also developing mobile app and satellite application for this purpose. The second that I think is very important is how to engage private sector. So private sectors base their operations across various regions in the Asia Pacific. If you look at the South China Sea, there are 15 companies working there. The Bay of Bengal, nine biggest companies in the area of fisheries are operating in this region. The Pacific Island, there are lots of like sale and purchase office of these companies that open their office there. So what we need to do is engage the private sector more. There is need to be more cooperation between small and middle power states in the three regions to cooperate to engage transnational cooperation in tackling IUU fishing. Engage here, from my point of view, have two meanings. The first one is for the small and middle power states across the three regions to cooperate with each other in order to address the misbehavior by transnational corporations. And second, also to gain the support from transnational corporations to address problems such as IUU fishing. There's already a number of initiatives that developed by the private sectors to make the seafood products and also the fishery products that they market more traceable. So there's the Seafood Task Force, this is based in Thailand, and there's also Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability. And the other action that I think need to be done is to include the fishery stakeholders in track 1.5 or track 2 diplomacy. We know that in the South China Sea region, we have the South China Sea Workshop that has been led by Indonesia since 1990. There's also South China Sea International Conference. It's led by the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam, a subsidiary body of the Vietnamese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But in this forum, fishery stakeholders, leaders of fishers, and also corporations working in this area are not present. It will be better to build a forum that's more inclusive to develop a more effective strategy to deal with IUU fishing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fabrica, for the very elaborate presentation. Before we enter the next session, for all participants, if you have some questions in mind, from now you can write down your questions in the chat box. Next, for the second session, we have Mr. Saki Mubarak Busro from the Center for Sustainable Ocean Policy, Universitas Indonesia. Mr. Saki, you can now start your presentation. I will sharing the screen. Is it clear, the slides? Mr. Saki?
Yep.
Yeah, you can start your presentation now. You may speak.
Good afternoon, my colleagues. Mbak Senia, Mas Syed Fauzan, honorable audiences, ladies and gentlemen. This verification of webinar series initiated by INADIS. I'd like to thank to the committee for organizing this important event. And in this opportunity, I will deliver a presentation concerning how to address illegal fishing from security or crime approach. Next slide, please.
Oh. I think there's a problem with the connection. Sorry. Okay.
Is it? Yeah, mainly my presentation will be of 8 parts, but I will be very quick due to time constraint. Next slide. Okay, this slide actually this is my favorite. I share everywhere this data, and as we can see from this data, the state of the world's marine fish stock has not improved in general, despite notable progress in some areas. Based on FAO's analysis of assessed commercial fish stock, the share of fish stock within biologically sustainable level decreased from 90% in 1974 to 68.8% in 2013. Thus, approximately 31.4% of fish stock were overfished. In 2011, it was 71.2%, and it declined again in 2013. In 2017, the maximal sustainable fish stock has decreased again to 40 to 59.6%. And as a matter of fact, I'm not surprised if someday we don't have fish in our ocean based on the data provided by FAO. Next slide. Having discussion to eliminate IE fishing, in my opinion, the role of SDG and in particular SDG 14 cannot be ignored. In SDG 14, there are two targets that are strongly related to IE fishing. Those are target 14.4 concerning sustainable fishing and target 14.6 dealing with the measures to end subsidies contributing to overfishing. As stated in target 14.4, by 2020, countries are expected to effectively regulate harvesting and ending overfishing as well as IE fishing and destructive fishing practices. The indicator to attain this target is the proportion of fish stock within biologically sustainable levels. Unlike most SDG targets, which have a target year of 2030, this indicator is set to be achieved by 2020. And if we have a look to the data provided by FAO that I presented before, the general trend of decline fish stocks within biologically sustainable levels from 1974 to 2017, it shows us that we have to work harder to make the target achieved. Next slide. Meanwhile, the target 14.6, it addresses specifically the measures to end subsidies to overfishing. This stage is very important and currently under WTO process. In general, by 2020, countries are expected to prohibit certain forms of fishery subsidies, which contribute to overcapacity and overfishing, eliminate subsidies that contribute to IU fishing, and refrain from introducing such new subsidies. The underlying message of this target is no harmful subsidies contributing to overcapacity and overfishing, and it is important also to eliminate the subsidies that contributes to IU fishing practices. Next slide. My colleagues, as we are aware, there are a lot of driving force leading to the rampant occurrence of IU fishing, but allow me to squeeze into three major causes. First is economic motive. Second is the problem with the ocean governance nationally, regionally, and internationally. And the third is weak law enforcement. For the first cause, economic directly drives IU fishing activities. Increasingly thin margins in legal fishing operations and high potential revenues from IU fishing are strong motivators for illegal activities. With regard to the ocean governance, weak governance at the regional, national, international levels creates a regulatory patchwork that has allowed IU fishing to flourish. In my opinion, coordinated gratification and implementation of strong international fisheries governance regimes, such as Port State Measures Agreement under FAO auspices can begin to fill these gaps. Meanwhile, for the third, barriers to investment, it stems from a lack of resources and logistical difficulties of effective MCS, monitoring, controlling, and surveillance over vast areas of the ocean, which undermines attempts to IU fishing. I believe a lack of political will coupled with the logistical difficulties in monitoring and reaching vast areas of ocean, often results in a weak enforcement. Next slide. In this slide and the next slide, we can see the data provided by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and Poseidon. Both organizations launched an index to track IUU fishing. There are 3 scores and 1 general score of countries performing the measures to eliminate IUU fishing. For port score, the overall score is 2.41 of 5. And then for the coastal score, the score is 2.42. And then for flag score, next slide, please. It is 2.01. And then the general score, it is 2.41. Okay. From the data provided by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and Poseidon, the index scores provide a strong indication that Sustainable Development Goal targets on ending IUU fishing will not be achieved, and that combating IUU fishing remains a huge global challenge. Next slide. Here we can see another comparison of states' performance in combating IUU fishing, and it can be observed from the data provided by United Nations Statistic Division in 2018. This data informs us the degree of implementation of international instruments aiming to combat IUU fishing. We can see that some countries have achieved the maximum degree to combat IUU fishing, among others, UK, Thailand, New Zealand, South Korea, Australia, and Canada with a score of 5, while Indonesia has attained score 4 in this regard. Next slide. This is a theoretical approach. I'd like to introduce the divergent approaches and domestic legal system among states in observing IUU fishing. As a matter of fact, perceptions, practices, approaches, and domestic legal system are varied among states in observing and addressing IUU fishing and fisheries crimes. The division between schools of thought of fisheries management and crimes in approaching those activities still in existence among countries. For instance, in a domestic legal system, Norway inclines to make separation between IUU fishing and fisheries crimes in terms of the sanction based on fisheries management and criminal acts. While on the other hand, Indonesia is the position to combat both IUU fishing and fisheries crimes by using administrative and imprisonment sanctions. The theoretical background to explain this divergence is malum prohibitum versus malum in se. The 2 principles of malum prohibitum and malum in se can be observed as the basic reference for countries to formulate their legal system and responding to environmental crimes. For malum prohibitum, the principle of which underlines behavior that is unlawful according to the law. But in general, this behavior is perceived as less serious than other sorts of social harms. The proponents of this tenet believe that damages to the environment are regarded as normal, as it is the consequence of industrial development, which also offers some benefits. While for the second principle, that is malum in se, this school of thought upholds the view that the behavior is wrong by nature, and it is therefore conceived as serious. In practice, this principle prohibits particular substances or actions, and Indonesia is the follower of malum in se principle. Next slide. The prime question after observing those data that I have presented before is if addressing IE fishing is sufficient from fisheries management approach solely. Next slide. I will give you one example, the connection between IU fishing or fisheries industry and human trafficking case in Indonesia. From the information I'm providing here, we can see human trafficking cases occurred for 11 years from 2004 until 2015. Most notable case happened in Maluku or Molucca, accounted for 614 cases, followed by 12, 600 cases. And the other cases were under 64, spreads across the country. Next slide. Here, I offer the advantages of addressing IE fishing for crime or security approach. First, it can eradicate transnational organized crime in fisheries industry. In bridging the connection between transnational organized crime and the fisheries industry, UNODC disclosed in 2011 report on transnational organized crime in the fishing industry focusing on trafficking in persons, smuggling of migrants, and trafficking of illicit drugs. It is evident from the report that fishers have misused fishing vessels when carrying out illegal activities, such as smuggling people, trafficking illegal drugs, trafficking illegal weapons, and even terrorism. The fishers are recruited by criminals due to their knowledge and skills, and their role is mostly to support the mastermind in committing transnational organized crimes in the fishery sector, including fishing vessels. And I believe by using crime approach, crime and security approach, both transnational organized crime and illegal fishing can be eliminated. Second, it can facilitate international collaboration. I believe under United Nations Conventions Against Transnational Organized Crimes, the mechanism for cooperation has been governed under the convention. The need to strengthen cooperation in bilateral, regional, and multilateral stages is affirmed throughout the convention. This Palermo Convention is designed to fight against particular criminal activities as well as to address the problems that states are facing on international cooperation. Third, I believe it can tighten cooperation on money laundering and confiscation of assets. Under Palermo Convention, the money laundering, we can, member states can cooperate to eliminate money laundering, and it can also confiscation of assets when the assets come from IU fishing if it is addressed from a security or crime approach. Fourth, it can facilitate extradition and mutual legal assistance. And then five, I believe it can enhance the cooperation on joint law enforcement investigation. And then the last one is it is also a pathway to transfer of sentenced persons. Next slide. I think this is my final slide. Thank you for the opportunity given to me.
Thank you, Mr. Saki, for the presentation. Next, let's move to the next speaker. We have Mr. Syed Fauzan Riyadi from Universitas Maritim Raja Ali Haji. Mr. Syed, the floor is yours. Yeah, I'll be sharing the screen.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Syed Fauzan Riyadi. I'm currently a lecturer in Raja Ali Haji Maritime University based in Tanjung Pinang, Riau Islands. My task in this seminar is to present the local dynamics, especially in North Natuna Sea. I am lucky enough to visit the Natuna Islands and the nearby Anambas Islands as two main islands group within the North Natuna Sea. And if I'm talking about the local fishermen, the context here is, as you can see in the pictures, it is a local fisherman who use very small boats, like in the pictures. It's only like 7 to 10 meters. And then we can see how the dynamics of the IUU fishing surrounding the areas affected a local traditional fishermen. Next slide, please. So the dynamics of the illegal IUU fishing in the area consisted of four main dynamics. The first is illegal fishing by foreign fishing vessels, mainly from China, Vietnam, Thailand, and Malaysia. And the second is unreported fishing, is the use of destructive gear and fishing out of the designed zone for a local Indonesian fishing vessel. The third is unreported fishing, where the modern fishing vessel from another area of Indonesia conflicted with the traditional fishermen because mainly they are fishing out of the legal zone. And the fourth is the unregulated fishing, where there is this market chain from the fisherman to the exporter. Next slide. Okay, as you can see here is two GPS position recorded by the local fishermen to show how much two foreign fishing vessels, the Vietnamese and the Chinese, are going inside the Indonesian area. And there are a lot of reports on how certain foreign vessels are trying to ram into the traditional Indonesian fishing vessel. And also the main concern is there are lack of law enforcement, as said by Mr. Zaki before. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, this we can see how the local fishermen, the one before, the local fishermen, because they are mainly the type of their vessel is not really big. They mainly only fish in nearby waters, and because the area of Indonesian fishing area is the whole North Natuna Sea to the Malacca Strait, there are many modern fishing vessels, mainly from Palembang, South Sulawesi, and from North Sumatra, that has a legal permit to fish in the North Natuna Sea, but actually they are not allowed to fish in the waters within 12 nautical miles. But because lack of enforcement, there are a lot of cases where the fishermen caught this modern fishing vessel fishing in the area within the 12 nautical miles within the islands. And because they are bigger and with more modern fishing gear, the local fishermen feel threatened by these modern fishing vessels. So the dynamics here show that once Indonesian government tried to address the area in North Natuna Sea is being fished by foreign fishing vessels, by trying to move more modern fishing vessels from Java to North Natuna Sea. But we can see that it is not really a good policy, because if the lack of enforcement, then it will be just the same perpetrators, whether it is the foreign fishing vessels or a national and yet more modern fishing vessels. But as the map shown in the previous slides, that local fishermen has an ability to fish more than 200 nautical miles from their islands. This means that actually this traditional fishermen can be used by the government, at least in the surveillance program, because they themselves, even though the fishing vessel is relatively small, they all use the GPS, and they are also equipped with the FM radio to communicate among themselves. Next slide. So the third dynamics is more, I think, the case studies of what Mr. Zaki said before about the market or the economic factors contributing to the IUU fishing. So one of the main problem is that the unreported fishing is something that has been happened all throughout the years, and it is also take form in something that within the Indonesian community considered as a usual practice. So by law, the port state measures, it should every fisherman should register the catch in every port. But the problem is this kind of policy is never been implemented and was viewed as unnecessary or cost. So the fishermen never report. And this process goes along up until, for example, of Natuna, to the export of the fish to Singapore. Every year, I think more than billions of tons fish from the Riau Islands exported to Singapore. But we can see that the statistical data from the Indonesian side and the Singapore side is different regarding how many fish are being exported. So illegality in Indonesia take another dimension. It's not really a hard law, because the lack of law enforcement then create a culture of permissiveness among the fishermen, the exporters, and other business persons related to fisheries. So they think that to 100% following the law is not necessarily useful. Some of the policies, if it is implemented, then it will only contribute to higher costs of fish in the market. So the importance of international regulation is at one side is very important, but we must also look at the dynamics. We understand that being a fisherman in Indonesia is not really a job. Being fisherman, especially the traditional fisherman, is really something that unless you are born in a fisherman household, it is something you are not proud of. Yeah, next slide, please. So these kinds of problems, I think, create several policy challenges. The first is that IUU fishing start at land. So there should be stricter land-based control and prevention. But this kind of policy will be impossible as long as we don't really like to regulate the so-called traditional fishermen. The very definition of traditional fishermen is a lot. Different international arrangement, different national arrangement create different definition to what extent is a local fisherman. But the main problem is usually the definition of traditional fishermen is because there are no political will to regulate them because it's viewed as too much hassle, because there are so many traditional fishermen and the cultural to reject some sort of regulation is growing, but it cannot be allowed anymore. So, for example, the I think the Ministry of Marine and Fisheries are already spread out their units all over the Indonesia, but I think the numbers are still low, and they need to strengthen the coordination to the fish market, because not everywhere in Indonesia the fishermen, the local fishermen, are going to the sea and return from the sea through a fishing port. Most of them using their own backyard. In Natuna case, fishermen goes to sea from their home. It's just like we in the city go to our office with our car in the garage. So this kind of setting cannot be regulated, but it contributed to the unregulated and unreported fishing. And without tackling these problems, then it will only grow lack of enforcement. And then there are aging traditional fishermen, and fishermen itself is really, I mean, in the country which fishermen is considered a good career, for example, like Japan, also face this problem, the aging traditional fishermen. So the more unmotivated someone to become a fisherman, I mean, it's because they are forced to be a fisherman, then the more most likely they will not follow the law. So it is important for the country of Indonesia, as vast as Indonesia, maritime country as Indonesia, to create a policy to promote modern fishermen as a good way of living. And Indonesia has also start to, I mean, they are the law to protect the fishermen, but if we read the law inside, there are clear boundaries that, for example, if a fisherman work in a fishing vessel owned by the captain, then they are not obligated to give the insurance to the fisherman. This kind of regulation is also contributing to the growth of this culture of not following the regulation on IUU fishing. And then, like Mr. Zaki said, the economic driven response is more needed than the security-based approach. It's not that I'm not agreeing with Mr. Zaki, but I mean, in Indonesian setting, the construction of the problems of IUU fishing is always related to national sovereignty. So we say that if we view the media jargon, we view the media's headlines, it's all talk about as if we are under attack. It is mainly because we are not strong enough to enforce the law. So basically, the problem of IUU fishing is really a complex one, but this complexity has been here in Indonesia, I mean, several years. So it takes, it cannot be solved just with the normative policy base. And so fishery management is just a small part within the ocean governance, but I think the what is ready in Indonesian political setting now is more in the terminology of maritime security. So I mean, the political will has produced our regulation on maritime security agency Bakamla. So if my research is finished, I can show that even though every institution that has maritime law enforcement task or responsibility combine all their fishing vessels and combine all the budget spent on them to cover the patrol area of Indonesia is still not enough. So what we say, what we hear mostly is that among these maritime law enforcement agencies, they are overlapping of responsibility. But what really happened is there are a lot of areas that even all of these agencies are not able to cover. So I think one side in Indonesian domestic politics, we need to change the stories. I mean, it's not really what happened in the border areas, but we can see the IUU fishing happen within the coastal zones, even in Java. You can see in North Jakarta, you can see among in northern ports, fish port of Java, there are a lot of illegalities happening. Fishermen do not report their catch, and so on and so forth. So the dynamics happen in local context in Indonesia show that how problems like illegal fishing happen because the culture of understanding the problem is limited, and there are no serious effort to explain more what did happen in the sea, because the problem of Indonesia, one of the problem is that we are try to put responsibility to agencies in their law, but we are not thinking about whether the agency has have ships or budget to operate the ship to enforce their responsibility or not. We just as long as they in the paper, or the responsibility to protect fishermen, to counter against IUU fishing are in the Ministry of Marine and Fisheries, and we assume that it can be upheld, it can be enforced. But in the reality, it's more it's not really that easy. Yeah, I think that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentations, Mr. Sayed. Okay, next I will open the question and answer session. So for participants, if you have any questions, you can write down your questions in the chat box. Okay, we already have some questions here. Wait. Uh, Sorry, I think there's a problem with the connection. Uh, the question is for Pak Sayed from Miss Tania Fabrica. Is the conflict between artisanal or small-scale fishers and commercial fishers well recorded in Natuna? Are there local efforts to improve local fishers' access to international market due to proximity between Natuna and Anambas with Indonesia and neighboring countries, which is Malaysia and Singapore?
Yeah, okay. I think I will respond to Senia's question and some other question in one in this. So I think the documentation of what did happen in the local level is one of the problem. I mean, I also try to answer Mbak Suzy's question. As we can see, if we look at the how our law enforcement agency stated in their yearly report on the accountability on what they have done, we can see they select only some indicators to show their success stories or success activities. So no, it will never be reported, and it might be collected, but it will never be reported because the government set the indicator of what they done themselves. We can see now the trend is they try to create some sort of maritime blah 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 index. I mean, Bakamla now is creating a maritime security index, and then there's another index and index that and index that. So it's just some sort of way to choose what to report themselves. One of the main problem is another main problem to contribute to this issue is that it is a same ministry or even same directorate general in under a ministry. They themselves who publish the permit or who could give the permit to the fishermen, but themselves or another director general who enforce the permit. So this create a problem because if, for example, the modern fishing vessel in Natuna, most likely their permit is being issued by the central government of Dirjen Perikanan Tangkap, and the problems of local fishermen is being handled by, for example, the PSDKP in the Natuna. So these two are different entity in the field, but they are under same ministry. I know. I think Mr. Zaki knows more on these issues. They are not being pushed into the public. So what Mbak Susi hope, I think, is not really happening in the near future. In studying the maritime governance in Indonesia, I think 2 or 3 times within the past 5 years, the INSA, Indonesian National Ship Owner Association chairman, stated clearly in the newspaper that the bribery, the pungli in the land can be seen by the person, but who knows what kind of pungli happen in the sea? Who will be the whistleblower? I think that's some of my answer.
Thank you, Pak Sayed. I think there's another question from Ms. Tenia to Pak Saki. Where do people who are the victims of human trafficking cases in Indonesia's fisheries sector come from? Do these cases involve transnational corporations or local companies in Indonesia?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Adrian. I have addressed the question in the chat box. I said that
Okay.
both transnational corporation and local companies. So Pusaka Benjina case is clear example the involvement transnational corporation in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have questions from Mr. Amal. To everyone, what is your response to the illegal fishing boat bombing carried out by former Menteri Susi? What is your response to the illegal fishing boat bombing carried out by former Menteri Susi?
What's the response? Do you think, does it mean in our opinion?
Yes, I think that.
Well, in my opinion,
yes, in your opinion.
Yeah, in my opinion, it was good measure. I think it carries deterrence effect. However, we should also consider the environmental aspect. When we bombed ship, for example, we have to clear the tank containing the oil, and also we have to choose a proper venue to sink the boat. And also, it's not only just bombing the foreign fishing vessels. We have to have also good cooperations with the neighbors. For example, those foreign fishing vessels bring flag states. It means that we have to talk to the states to ask to the foreign fishing vessel not to do illegal fishing in our economic exclusive zone or in our territorial sea. So both we have to do, we have to have a good cooperation with our neighbors, we have to talk to them. We have to go, we have to have a bilateral cooperation properly, and also in some ways we can use harder measure such as bombing those foreign fishing vessels. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zaki. Maybe Ms. Fabrica or Mr. Syed have some opinions for this question.
Yeah, maybe I try to comment a little. So the success indicators of tackling IUU fishing is not capturing the foreign vessel. So the capturing foreign vessel now creates more problems. Just last week, there's a news in from Natuna that there are still like hundreds or maybe less than 100 Vietnamese fishing persons. I mean, the persons from the Vietnamese fishing vessels that are captured by Indonesian fishing law enforcement agencies, and there are no some sort of facility to detain, and we are under law are not allowed to detain them, so they are free to roam the neighborhood, and they start to stealing money or stealing goods from the local in Natuna. So it's not really the good indicator. I mean, the good indicator of tackling IUU fishing, for example, in our exclusive economic zone, is that if we cannot patrol the areas, then, or if we feel that our fishermen is not sustainable, is not enough to cover that area, then we are more than happy to do a cooperation with our neighbor to exploit the fishery there, rather than to show off that we are able to capture the fishing vessels. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Syed.
I just want to add a little bit because Zaki and Syed already explained it. In terms of bombing the vessel is to create deterrent effect, but I think it will be better as well if the government have a more clear communications why they are doing that. So like the tremendous impact to the environment, but also what I can gather from Syed's presentation earlier, the threats posed by IUU fishing directly to the small scale fishers, their livelihood and also their safety of it in the sea when they are operating being rammed. And I interview fishermen in the past who operate in the area of Sulu, Sulawesi Sea, and how the IUU fisher perpetrators were like shooting at them. Some of their colleagues were killed. So these are the kind of information that need to be put forward as a communication message from the government.
Thank you, Ms. Ania. Next, we have a question from Tariq from India. This question is for Mr. Saki. The question is, how far the WTO fisheries subsidies is responsible for the devastating problems of IUU fishing? So he said that several authors have addressed that it is more of a problem of lack of governance than that of subsidies. What is your opinion about this question, Mr. Saki?
Hold on. How far the responsible for the Well, I think currently WTO is facilitating fishery subsidies negotiation among WTO member countries as mandated by SDG 14. And to the best of knowledge, fishery subsidies contribute significantly to the problems of IUU fishing. There are, if I may convey that there are divergent opinions between developed countries and developing countries in that sense concerning fishery subsidies. for developing countries, we want to have a subsidy to the small-scale fisheries. But for developed countries, they didn't want to. They don't want developing countries to give subsidies to local fishermen and small-scale fisheries. So those divergent opinions are still in existence. So
thank you, Dr. Zaki. Thank you. I understand. I'm sorry if I may speak for a few seconds, because
okay.
I was actually looking into this problem in the Bay of Bengal region, and I am in the second year of my PhD, and I have reviewed a lot of literature wherein I have got to understand from them, from the developing nations, and from the the global South and global North divide has really come into picture, because the global all the developed countries would never allow the continuing of the subsidies, because in developing countries like India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, and all in this Southeast Asian region and South Asian region, they need subsistence and allowances for the small scale fishers.
Yeah.
So that's the divide that you were talking about, and I really wanted that you had addressed it the way the way I had hoped you would address it. Thank you, Dr. Zaki. Thank you for such insight.
Tariq, I'm part of a negotiating team from Indonesia in WTO negotiation regarding the subsidies. So a few days ago, Indonesia had a bilateral meeting with India, and then we had same perception. We had the same notion that we should give still fishery subsidy to the local fishermen and small scale fisheries, because it doesn't give them to be rich and to make a market not competitive. It gives the small scale fisheries or small scale fishermen to live.
Only for sustenance.
Yeah. Perhaps we can talk later on.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question and the answer. I think because we are running out of time, this will be the last question from Rani. This question is for everyone. What are the solutions that Indonesian government can provide for the IUU fishing at Malacca Strait? What are the solutions that Indonesian government can provide for the IUU fishing at Malacca Strait? Maybe.
Yes, perhaps I can address the question. I will try to address the question. Indonesia and Malaysia have concluded what we call as a memorandum of understanding between the government of Indonesia and Malaysia in respect of the common guidelines concerning treatment of fishermen by maritime law enforcement agencies of the Republic Indonesia and Malaysia. And there are several provisions that we can refer to as part of both countries' measures to address IUU fishing. One of them is inspection and request to leave the area shall be conducted promptly towards all fishing boats, except for those using illegal fishing gears, such as explosive, electrical, and chemical fishing gears. So in short, if even though we still have a boundary, undelimited boundary agreement not yet concluded by both countries, but if, for example, Malaysia fishermen or fishing vessels, they fish in Indonesia with or they use illegal fishing gears such as explosive, electrical, and chemical fishing gears, we can capture them and also size them into the detention center.
Thank you, Mr. Zaki.
Just to add a little bit, just listening from what the earlier presentations by other presenters, I think one way to address IUU fishing also to focus on the access to market to fishers, because as I had mentioned in his presentations, there are huge smuggling of fishing products from Indonesia to other neighboring countries. So if the government can cooperate with each other to find a better way to improve market access to fishers, especially to small-scale fishers, this could help to address the problem.
Sorry, Senia. I think the data from like 10 years show that the index nilai tukar petani, or in this case, the nilai tukar nelayan, the index of traditional fishermen in Natuna is always above the national average. So fishing price, the fish price is not a problem for the fishermen. So it's not really because the fish price is low, then they are do the IUU fishing. I mean, those kind of logic maybe only apply more on the modern business-oriented fishermen or fishing industries, rather than to the small-scale fishermen. So the problem is they themselves is not really keen to follow the rules, to report what catch they have, and to assist government in surveillance while they are out of the sea in fishing, because this kind of network is not really done effectively. I mean, yes, there are some initiatives like the Pokmaswas, or the group of local surveillance done by the Ministry of Marine and Fisheries, but the policy itself is not really sustainable in its way. So I mean, not necessarily that the market access contribute to IUU fishing just because the price is not good. And that's my point.
Ms. Senia, do you want to respond?
No.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the speakers for the answers. And for the participants, if you still have some questions in mind, you can send questions directly to the speakers' emails. I think they have written down their emails at the chat box. And I think we have reached the end of our seminar. From the presentation and open discussion, I think we can conclude that to combat illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, today's webinar again stresses the importance of connecting efforts and approach through multiple scales of governance. I think that's the conclusion for our webinar today. And before we close the webinar, can we take a picture, Miss Indra? Take a picture of all the participants here.
It's already done.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And also, last announcement.
Shall we do it again?
Yeah, maybe with.
Okay. Wait a moment, yeah. Okay, get ready. 1, 2, 3. This is the first. Okay, first page, and this is second page. 1, 2, 3. Moment, please. Okay, this is the third page. 1, 2, 3. Okay, done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Indra. And also last announcement for the participants for the certificates, it will be sent to you to your emails within the next 2 weeks. I think that's it. Thank you so much for attending this webinar, and see you in the next session. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for also
Thank you
for
very
the
much.
speakers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for such an insightful.
Thank you.